Hey guys, today I want to talk about how the UK general election could impact your finances. If you're like me, you are probably pretty fed up with the whole election process at the moment, and you might even be unsure who to vote for. What I want to do with today's video is to go into a lot of detail. I spent the last 4 to 5 hours reading every line in every manifesto that's been put out by the Labour Party, the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, the Reform, as well as the Green Party. And what I want to do with today's video is pick out the core elements of what it means for you, so you don't have to go and bother wasting your time reading all those manifestos. If you love the sound of today's video, please do me one favor. Literally over there, it takes a second. Please hit the subscribe button and support the work that we're putting here into our channel. Now, because I want to obviously make sure I'm giving you factual information, I've made a lot of notes on my phone, so I'll be referencing my phone just to make sure that I'm reading you the right summaries for each one. And whilst you're there, if you're really liking this video, please hit the like button. That helps the algorithm let people know that people are watching the video and it recommends it to other people. I'd love to make this actually quite interactive, so jump in the comments and please comment as you watch as well. For those who are new to our channel, my name is Ken Okorafor. I'm the one half of the Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy. I'm a chartered accountant, former CFO, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've had a 14-year career working in financial services. I'm also a Sunday Times best-selling author of our debut book, Financial Joy, a 10-week plan to help you banish debt, grow your money, and unlock financial freedom. I'll link to it below and above if you want to check it out. Now, now that I've done all the formalities, let's jump straight into the video. So I'm going to do this video this way. I'll start with one political party, and I'm not here really trying to convince you, by the way, to vote for any particular party. I just want to tell you what's up so you can make your own decision. And then I'll move on. For each party, I'll share what's going on in terms of their manifesto and why we should care or not. And then I'll jump onto the next one. So please be patient. Feel free to jump to different parts of the video because I'm going to timestamp it to make this super easy. Let's start with the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party, as at the time of making this video, stand potentially to win in a massive way in this election. If you are looking at the forecast, what the polls are saying, it all looks like it's going that way, okay? However, let's talk about their manifesto and what the key points are. Point number one is that their main message is that they want to deliver change. Now, obviously, we've had 14 years of, if I'm being polite, rubbish, really. And a lot of people are fed up. A lot of people just want something else. They're just tired. Because, look, I'm going to keep it real. A lot of these politicians, whether it's Labour, Conservatives, Reform, Liberals and Green, they say a lot of stuff. And they do a lot of stuff. They say one thing and they do something else. Now, Labour have pitched their tent as the party for change. Now, but it gets more interesting because Labour have actually positioned themselves as what they call as the party for wealth creation. They say, and I quote, they say that they have a tax lock for working people. Yeah? A pledge not to raise rates for income tax, national insurance and VAT. Now, when Sir Keir Starmer was challenged about the definition of working people on LBC last week, or a week or so ago, he said this, and I quote, because I had to go and listen to this and type this word for word. And he said, "The person I have in mind when I say working people is people who earn a living, rely on our services, and don't really have the ability to write a check when they get into trouble." Now, think about that for a moment. If you think about that, what that says to me, and you might have a different interpretation, is that this actually rules out diligent savers, investors, or anyone who is trying to build wealth. Yeah? Which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because if they're pitching themselves up to be the party for wealth creation, then this by itself is saying to me that really and truly, they are going to be coming after people who are not quote unquote working people. And here are some examples. I'm going to just, just spell them out and you can tell me what you think in the comments, right? Where could they come, right? They haven't spoken, because with these elections, you have to think to yourself, What's the unspoken thing? They'll be saying a lot of things, publishing them in these glossy manifestos, but what are they not telling us? Here's one area. This could be in it. No, this is just stuff that could happen. The first area they could target is pensions. Now, they could cut the 25% tax-free lump sum that we currently get when it comes to pensions when you retire. In fact, a lot of people right now, on the back of the possibility of this happening, are actually starting to take their tax-free lump sums because they might be lucky enough to be able to do that. When it comes to pensions, they could target the 60k annual allowance that we have at the moment, which means that, again, people are trying to use up those allowances whilst they still can in case things change. They could potentially impose a flat rate of income tax relief on when it comes to our pensions. Now, this could mean that people who are additional rate taxpayers or higher rate taxpayers, for example, will then get a flat rate, which will be okay for basic rate taxpayers, but it will be negative for higher rate taxpayers and additional rate taxpayers because this is what made pensions more tax efficient, much more interesting from a tax perspective. Another area they could target is ISAs. They could target a tax-free ISA limit, which currently sits at 20k per person per annum. This, of course, is then making people think, well, actually, I may as well be using up my allowances as best as I can if you're currently one of those people who's lucky enough to have some money to save and invest. One other area is capital gains tax. They could align the capital gains tax rate with income tax, again, penalizing investors. If you think about it, capital gains tax, for those who don't know, arises on assets that you have that have gone up in value and you come to sell them, for example, property or shares, for example, that are held outside of an ISA wrapper, for example. It's estimated that doing this could actually raise them up to £16 billion if they went after aligning capital gains taxes with income taxes. Another area is inheritance tax. Think about it. Pensions at the moment, a lot of people are using them for financial planning purposes from the perspective of leaving wealth to the next generation, because pensions currently, if someone passes away by the age of 75, they can pass on their pension pot onto their family members without any inheritance tax. Of course, they could go after that, as well as go after AIM shares that allow people to avoid inheritance tax. And there's one other area that's worth mentioning when you think about this idea that they're saying that they are locking, almost, what's the word they use? That they are effectively, they've got a tax lock on income tax and, all this other stuff, NI and so on, VAT. Let's not forget that we've got these frozen personal allowances, essentially a fiscal drag or a stealth tax in effect. Labour have been very silent on this matter, and so have the Conservatives, and I'm going to be coming to them in a moment. This fiscal drag was put in place by the current government, which meant that all our personal allowances are frozen until 2028. Now, this is a massive cash machine for the government. It's estimated that it's actually raising them around £100 billion over the 5-year period that they've got this thing in place. In fact, the IFS, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, estimates that this is equivalent to putting up income tax by 6p or 6%. Okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting. And again, Labour have not said anything about this, but, pay attention to what's not said. Who's to say that Labour might not extend the 2028 cutoff for when this current frozen personal allowance is meant to end? They could extend it as their way of essentially imposing more taxes on everybody. It's estimated that around 3 million people will become higher rate taxpayers as a result of these frozen personal allowances, which, if you think about it, has a behavioral impact, because if you are being dragged into higher rate tax, you're more likely to put more money into your ISAs, you're more likely to want to put money into pensions as a way to try to cut down on the impact you're having on your tax burden. And as ever, we are always being taxed more, and of course those people who enter the higher rates of tax mean they're paying higher rate taxes on dividends, they're paying higher rate taxes on capital gains. In addition to that, their personal savings allowance becomes diminished because you have £1,000 as an amount you can earn in interest if you're somebody who's a basic rate taxpayer, or £500 if you are a higher rate taxpayer. So when you add up all these things, there's a lot that's going on really that's unspoken. That means that we are all really getting poorer. So when you hear people saying things like, oh, I'm not giving you more taxes, honestly, it's all BS, because we are going to get taxed. Now, point 3, when it comes to Labour and what they're planning to do is that they plan to kickstart the economic growth in the UK. So this is interesting. It says here, they want to deliver economic stability with tough spending rules. Their manifesto says, and I quote, "We will embrace a new approach to economic management, what they're calling securonomics, that understands sustainable growth relies on a broad base and resilient foundations." That sounds good. Those are good words and good thoughts and good ideas. They've also said that they will put a cap on corporation tax at the current level of 25%, which is good news. They've said they will have a new partnership with businesses to boost growth everywhere, a national wealth fund to invest in jobs, and this is the key bit about housing. They've said here that they will have planning reform to build railways and roads and labs and 1.5 million houses over the next 5 years. That's 300,000 houses per year. And they're saying here that we need, and they will develop a new 10-year infrastructure strategy. Okay, now point 4, this is the painful bit for a lot of people, is that they want to impose VAT and business rates to be levied on private school fees. This is expected to raise £1.51 billion. Now, here's the thing. I want to be real with this point. Everyone I know, let's be upfront. Everybody I know who pays for private education is pissed off about this particular manifesto point, naturally. But the thing is, whenever you think about private school, you always think, oh yeah, private school is paid for by rich people. But everybody I know, and go and ask, you might know people who are also paying for private school fees. A lot of these people are actually not rich people at all. These are people who are working very hard. A lot of them come from ethnic minority backgrounds. They're working very hard, paying a lot in taxes. Don't forget, private school fees are paid out of net income, paying a lot in taxes already. Don't forget, these people also have a state school place that they've given up to then pay for their child to be educated, because they believe in education as a key thing for their child. And everyone has that right to be able to use their income, make certain sacrifices, and invest in their child if they want. But here's my problem with this policy, is I feel that this particular point on imposing VAT on private school fees is effectively a way of weaponizing voters. I see it as such a divisive policy in this country. It's that question of them against us sort of thing. Is this, always getting one group of society against the other? Now you might have a view on this, and I'd love to actually hear from you in the comments if you have a view on this particular topic. The other thing that this obviously does naturally is that it intensifies competition for state school places. Many schools are expected potentially to lose between 20 and 30% of the students whose parents are really working to pay private school fees. Obviously, a small percentage of people will obviously are well off, and they're wealthy and rich or whatever, and they've inherited money and they can pay this stuff out of trust funds. But most people who do are not in that bracket, which means that those people, if they can't afford it, just think about it. Where do you get another 20% to pay on top of your out of your net income? Where'd you get it from? Right? With the cost of living crisis and many other things that are going on, many people will go, you know what? Can't do it. So they will come into the state system, which means more competition in state schools, more competition in grammar schools, obviously, which is part of the state system, and so on. Yeah, this is one thing I've not really understood, is why this is imposed. But hey, it's a policy. Point 5 is that Labour plan to raise revenue from closing further non-dom tax loopholes and investments in reducing tax avoidance schemes. They expect that this will raise £5.23 billion. Now, if you think about it, Like, just think about it for a moment. It's highly unlikely they'll raise that much money. Why? Because these non-doms are leaving the UK. They're leaving. Now, yes, I get the non-dom thing is unfair, you know, and it's a thing that's therefore very, like, they're super, super rich, right? But it did something interesting for the UK, because it meant that these people will bring their resources to the UK and what have you. And you think about it, they're super rich, right? All this stuff that's said about super rich people. Super rich people they're way ahead of the way these governments think. They will just move their money and move their capital elsewhere because they can. So what's happening really in reality is that the UK is becoming more unattractive. Why? Because take, for example, we have a 40% inheritance tax rate that applies to global assets. The super rich don't want to pay tax on their global assets. So what do? They move away from the UK. And it doesn't just affect the super rich. Higher income earners in the UK are moving away. And it's even trickling down to mid-level income earners who are going, do you know what? I'm kind of fed up of the UK. I'm fed up. I want to get out of the UK. So they are buggering off. They are going somewhere else. They're going to places like Switzerland, Malta, the Middle East, Italy, the Caribbean, places in Africa. They're leaving. And what does that do for the UK? Not very much. Not very much, right? Okay, but, the government have to do what they have to do, right? And, for them, it's going to raise them a lot of money, according to their maths, right? Labour has also proposed raising £565 million in revenue from closing carried interest tax loopholes. So effectively, the entire approach is to raise money from closing down these loopholes that they allow to exist for so long. These, the governments and the people that run the country. And these things exist because they created them, right? They didn't just show up, right? But anyway, they're closing them now and they're using them to raise money. Now, point 6 is that they'll maintain their commitment to the state pension triple lock. Yeah? Now, this is obviously designed to get the voters from the, pensioners. Same as the Conservatives have actually maintained, the triple lock. They protect this like it's like the most important thing because they won those votes. In the Labour manifesto, it says, we will also undertake a review of the pensions landscape to consider what further steps are needed to improve pension outcomes and increase investment in UK markets. So basically, keep an eye, they're going to be reviewing pensions. Point 7 is affordable homes. I talked about this earlier. They're going to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. Now, here's the thing. They said they have pledged to deliver the biggest increase in social and affordable housing in a generation. With changes to what they're calling the affordable homes program to ensure more homes are built from existing funding. Now, for first-time buyers, they're saying that they will work with local authorities to give them the first chance to buy homes. This is what Labour is proposing. They've also proposed to introduce a mortgage guarantee scheme to support first-time buyers struggling to save for a house deposit. Now, I've taken a while on Labour because this is, they're expected to win this election according to all the polls. So I'm going to now move on to the Conservatives, but there's a lot more with Labour. And, I've just focused on stuff that might affect your finances. So please go and read their manifesto if you want, or read a summary elsewhere. But I've covered really what you need to know from a kind of numbers perspective. Now, the Conservatives, I want to talk about these guys because they've been plagued by scandal upon scandal upon scandal. Take, for example, the most recent Gamblegate. I mean, that you couldn't make this stuff up, right? So on one hand, you're like, you know what? we've been with these guys for 14 years, and you're like, I'm kind of fed up. And, you probably won them out. But at the same time, you won them out, but is the grass really greener? No pun intended. Who knows, right? So let me talk about what they plan to offer. So point 1 is they want to deliver a strong economy. So they're promising the key thing here is another 2p off national insurance from 8p to 6p. Remember, they dropped it by 2p previously and 2p before that. It says here, it says that our long-term plan is to abolish national insurance altogether when it comes to when it's economically responsible to do so. This is what they say on their manifesto. So estimates for this 2p cut are that for somebody earning the average income of £35,000 a year will be £449 better off. For somebody on 50k a year, they'll be £749 better off per year. Yeah, that's the maths. Now, bear in mind, with these cuts, you always have to think to yourself, how are they actually funding this stuff? All these cuts, nothing's really telling us, for example, how these NI cuts will actually impact our current poor public services, how will it impact the NHS, how will it impact schooling, and so on. So always take these promises with a bit of a pinch of salt and question what they're really going to be doing to fund all of it. Now, the Conservatives also pledged to abolish the main rate of self-employed NI contributions after scrapping more recently the Class 2 contributions in April. They also promised not to increase income tax, VAT, but obviously remember the stealth taxes that I talked about earlier. That means that we are getting poorer very quietly. And of course, you would remember that if you're one of the fortunate ones who earns £100,000 and beyond, you're always losing £2 of your personal allowances for every £1 above that, making it an effective rate of tax of 60%. They have also said from a strong economy perspective that they will protect the triple lock and what they're calling triple lock plus, effectively saying that a state pension will never get taxed under the Conservatives, under them. They're also proposing 30 hours of free childcare a week, saving eligible families £6,900 per year. Now, my personal thoughts on this is that, the Conservatives have been around for a long time and, GDP growth in the UK has barely moved. It's always hovering around 0%. Productivity remains poor in the UK. What will they do differently, really, for us to have this quote-unquote strong economy? I don't know. And what about these frozen allowances? Why are they still frozen? Yes, I get it's a cash machine for the government. That might be why. But it might be worth talking about it rather than just skipping it and avoiding it altogether. When it comes to pensions, they have promised to protect pension savers, stating that under our new pensions tax guarantee, Conservatives will not introduce any new taxes on pensions. We will maintain a 25% tax-free lump sum. At least they said so, right? And they will maintain the tax relief on pension contributions at their marginal rate. It says here, we will not extend national insurance to employer pension contributions. This is good. It's a good promise. At least they said it. On housing, they've pledged to unveil a £1 billion package to support help first-time buyers. This will they will also introduce government-backed mortgages to help first-time buyers to get on a property ladder with a 5% deposit. Just speeding up here real quick. Now, it's interesting to note here also that Rishi Sunak also announced that first-time buyers' stamp duty threshold will be made permanent. It was due to fall down to £300,000 in April 2025, but they've made that they've made that permanent, and they've pledged to build 1.6 million new homes over the next Parliament, compared to the 1.5 million, they're about the same, by Labour. Now, looking at child benefit, they've said here that they will raise the threshold for child benefit payments from £60,000 to £120,000. And most importantly, this is key, it will be assessed on income on a household basis, rather than the situation where you have two people where one of them, as soon as they cross 60k, they lose all the tax, the child benefit by 80k, for example. Or you can have two people on 59k each and they still keep the entire child benefit. Yeah. Overall, I would say that Conservatives have positioned themselves as a party for economic security. Now, they say their plans are fully funded, but, it's questionable. For example, they said they'll reduce the projected welfare bill by £12 billion. And they're also saying they'll crack down on tax avoidance and evasion, as well as cut civil service numbers, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot they're saying. But according to the IFS, there's a lot of doubt as to whether they'll be able to have those 12 billion in savings per year as a result of those various crackdowns they talked about. Overall, in my personal opinion, and you have your opinion, please let me know below. I personally think there's a lot of promises that are really there to try to win more votes, naturally, it almost seems quite desperate in a way. But, to be honest with you, it probably is too late in many ways. But hey, what do I know? Good to know what you think below. Now, let's talk about the Liberal Democrats real quick. Now, although highly unlikely to win, it's just good to know what's likely to go on. Now, the key message with the Liberal Democrats is that they're saying they want to fight for a fair deal for you and your community. That's their core message. Now, interesting, they want to spend an extra £5.2 billion per year on the NHS, but they're going to fund this via capital gains tax increases. So here's what they've outlined. They will charge capital gains tax at 20% for gains of up to £50,000, 40% on gains between 50k and 100k, and 45% for gains over £100,000. They also would like to bring capital gains tax in line with income tax. This is pretty significant. But they're saying, but it will be based solely on the capital gains. So instead of the current system where for them to decide what rate of capital gains tax you're paying, they basically say, they add basically your capital gains and your income together, and then together they'll say, oh, this is how much you've earned, so therefore this is the rate you're going to pay. But they want to base it purely on the capital gain, which actually seems pretty sensible. At the moment, high rate taxpayers pay 24% on residential property or 20% on everything else, and basic rate taxpayers pay 18% on residential property for capital gains tax or 10% on everything else. Yeah. Now, also note that the Liberal Democrats want to raise the capital gains tax allowance from £3,000. Bear in mind, this used to be £12,300 before, Jeremy Hunt took that down to where it's at the moment at £3,000. They plan to raise it to £5,000 if elected. The thing about these Liberal Democrats is that at least they actually admit that they're going to be taxing us more. However, who wants to pay more tax? Nobody does. Not saying, you shouldn't. Obviously, taxes are used for public services and paying for various things. And yes, they should be paid by people. But where does it stop, man? Every year we're paying more taxes, and it's getting really frustrating in various ways. Now, what's interesting about the Liberal Democrats is when it comes to pensions, they've said they want to give everyone a decent chance at a decent retirement. So I found this particularly interesting. They've developed measures to end gender pension gaps in the private pensions and ensure working age carers can save properly for retirement. I thought that was a really good thing to have there. They've also said they want to end the scandal of lost top-up payments by overhauling the processing system and providing proper receipts. They've promised to keep the triple lock, as all the others have. They've also got this really odd thing around share buybacks. They've said they want to introduce a 4% tax on FTSE 100 buybacks, where companies basically purchase their own shares back from investors. I think this is a pretty bad idea. And will basically discourage people from using equity finance, because share buybacks are another way that companies give back money to investors rather than giving them dividends. They do share buybacks. And on energy for Liberal Democrats, they've said they want to cut energy bills and emissions and end fuel poverty by launching an emergency home energy upgrade program with free insulation, heat pumps for low-income households. Now, interesting though, there were some really odd things that, will not really go down well with, people who are buy-to-let investors, for example. They've said here that they want to, so interesting, they want to reintroduce the requirements for landlords to upgrade the energy efficiency of their properties to EPC of level C or above by 2028. This could be very costly. They also would immediately require all new homes and non-domestic buildings to be built to zero carbon standards, including being fitted with solar panels, progressively increasing standards as technology improves. Now, sounds good in theory, but very expensive for home builders and what have you. From a housing perspective, they want more social housing, as you'd expect. The Lib Dems have said they want to make sure that they build 380,000 new homes every year, with at least 150,000 of that being social housing. Note, 380,000 homes is 1.9 million homes over 5 years, much higher than the Conservatives at 1.6 million and Labour at 1.5 million. Okay. Overall, all parties are effectively making big promises when you think about it, but will they deliver? Now, there is one thing they've said about free personal care from the Liberal Democrats in their manifesto, that they want to bring in free personal care in England to help the elderly and the disabled. Wow, this is a pretty big deal. Because at the moment, if you know anything about the care system, care is means tested in England, and councils only really step in when you're seen to have savings of less than about £23,000. So to be proposing free personal care in England, it's a pretty big deal, actually. This is the only manifesto that I've seen actually go into this much detail when it comes to stuff like care, unless I've missed it in the others, and please correct me if I have. And then we've got the Green Party. Now, the Green Party, interestingly, have a wealth tax that they want to introduce, a wealth tax of 1% annually on assets over £10 million. That works out to be £100,000 a year in payments. And they also want to introduce a 2% wealth tax on assets over £1 billion. Obviously, only a tiny minority of people will pay this. They want to reform capital gains tax to align the rates paid by taxpayers on income and taxable gains. This will again affect less than 2% of income tax payers, but this alignment is pretty expensive for people, and it's worth pointing out. They also want to align income from investments, so dividends, for example. They want to align that with the tax and national insurance contribution rates on employment income. Yeah. In addition, they want to remove the upper earnings limit that restricts the amount of national insurance paid by higher earners, i.e. effectively, when you look at national insurance at 8%, that's paid above the 40% tax threshold. This will mean that you have a combined rate of 48% and 53%, so 45 plus 8 for the additional rate taxpayers is 53%, and 40 plus 8 for the higher rate taxpayers is 48%. You have a combined rate of 48% and 53% respectively in income and NI rates. This is what they're proposing. Now, this is interesting for housing, right? So housing for the Greens, they want to introduce rent controls so that local authorities can control rents. Wow. If the rental market is unaffordable for many local people, how would that even work? I'm just very curious about that. How do they define unaffordable? It already is unaffordable in many ways. How do you where do you put a line and go, now it's unaffordable, so therefore I'm going to introduce rent controls? Makes no sense to me. But this is what they propose. They've also said a new stable rental tenancy and end to no-fault evictions, so tenants are secure in their homes. They've also said they pledge to provide 150,000 new social homes every year through, new build and the purchase and refurbishment of older housing stock. Now, interestingly, they did say something that really stood out to me. They said they want to end the individual right to buy. To keep social homes for local communities in perpetuity. So very, very radical, think about it, in terms of what they're suggesting here. Now, the Reform Party, currently plagued by the racism row and many other things. In fact, just before I came on this, recording this video, I read an article by Sky News as well as the FT. The FT actually says here that Reform UK general election candidate has defected to the Conservatives, the second in the past week, to quit the Populist Party following a backlash over racist remarks by some of its activists. So there's a lot kind of going on there, but let's just focus on what they're actually proposing. And this I found to be so radical, but let's just see what they're saying. From a tax and spending perspective, Reform is saying they want to raise the minimum income tax threshold to £20,000. This could be very, very popular if you think about it, particularly given we're all feeling the pain when it comes to these personal allowance thresholds being frozen and this, this fiscal drag actually happening. A 20k, limit before income taxes come in is very, very attractive. Yeah. They've also said they will raise a 40% higher rate tax threshold to 70k. Woo! That's incredible if it actually could happen. They would scrap stamp duty on properties under 750,000. Note that that's 3 times the current 250k 0% threshold. 3 times. They've also said they would abolish inheritance tax on estates that are below £2 million. In addition, they will scrap VAT on energy bills, they will reduce government spending, and so on. On the economy, they've said this. They will reduce corporation tax from 25% to 20% and raise the threshold for which you'd pay corporation tax from £50,000 to 100k. Yeah, the threshold over which you'd pay that higher rate. Yeah, they would abolish, and this is great for you lot who are self-employed, they will abolish the IR35 rules. They would scrap business rates for small and medium firms, and they will raise the VAT threshold to £120,000. I mean, come on. These are so radical, what they're suggesting here, and very expensive. On education, I found this particularly interesting. They've said they want to provide 2-year courses so that they can reduce student debt. Wow, and allow students to kind of get into the workforce a lot earlier. And this, you lot who have student loans will love this. They've said they want to scrap student loan interest, dubbing it a rip-off. I'm sure many of you would agree. Many of you would agree, right? The party, they want to declare war on student loan interest because they say a lot of the courses are just rubbish. They're simply not good enough. And this is interesting, and this is a fight against Labour actually. They've said they want to have tax relief for private schools, interestingly. They want to provide tax relief of 20% in an attempt to just take off some of the pressure that's been put into the private school, being placed on state schools as a result of the proposals to add VAT to private school fees. Okay. Speaking about families, and this I found is interesting as well. They're proposing a marriage tax allowance, on incomes of up to £20,000, and they want to front load the benefit system, allowing mothers, specifically mothers, interesting, right? Rather than parents, allowing mothers to stay at home. A father could be the one playing that role too, but they want to allow mothers specifically to stay at home. In summary, I would say that the Reform UK manifesto has a lot of radical things in it. Lots of seemingly, on the surface of it, attractive ideas. Some of them are a bit questionable as well. But the real question is this: how is all this stuff being funded? Politicians will tell us what we want to know. They will tell you all the things you want to hear, as long as you vote for them. But how is it really going to be funded is the real question. Now, I spent a lot of time going through all these parties, and honestly, it feels like my head's spinning. That's the reality of it. I spent all day reading these manifestos and then spending all this time unpacking it. I want to summarize now by saying that there's a lot at the moment that's been said about not giving Labour a massive majority. Everywhere you look, this is what everybody seems to be saying. Yeah, don't give the majority and all this stuff. Here's some thoughts. If Labour does win, my personal feeling is that nothing much will change. In fact, I think life will be more of the same, except you and I will pay more taxes. That's really what I feel about it. And I want to know what you think, in the comments. Now, from a stock market perspective, the impact of a Labour win on financial markets is expected to be minimal, especially because, the polls have been predicting that this will happen anyway. So it's unlikely that a massive majority by Labour will lead to the markets being unsettled, basically. So stock markets, I don't expect anything material to really happen on the back of if Labour win and they win a majority. The bond markets, again, quite similar in the same way in that, the focus really, it would appear, seems to be on what's going on with interest rates and when it's expected that interest rates might begin to fall. But, let's see how that all pans out. From a tax perspective, in my conclusion, I've talked about it endlessly in this video, so please refer back to our expectations. But effectively, no matter who wins, expect to pay more tax. That's just it. And from a wealth perspective, again, speaking to Labour specifically, I don't expect that, although they're dubbed as like the wealth creation party, I don't expect that we would have more opportunities to build wealth. I don't expect that would happen. Just think about it. Based on what we've talked about today, I don't really see that becoming a reality for people. I think we will become poorer and it will become harder there'll be no point. Think about it. You're working hard, you're trying to invest, you're trying to put money apart, but you're being slapped basically with more taxes, more things, more restrictions. There's really no incentive for us to build wealth. That's my impression, but your impression might be different. Now, if the Conservatives win, I honestly expect more of the same, if not worse. That's genuinely how I feel. I just feel that given what I've just summarized for Labour and for Conservatives, I kind of feel like our choices it just sucks, to be honest. There isn't really I genuinely just feel like, wow, this is a pretty bad set of choices to pick from. On one hand, you've got people who've been there for the last 14 years. On the other hand, you've got people who are coming in. There's some excitement about them, but there's some question marks as well. Now, whilst other parties have interesting policies, they will not win. Let's be real, right? Unless it's where you have a coalition or that sort of thing happening, who knows? Ultimately, my view is that most people will vote selfishly. They'll say one thing to their friends, but when they get to that ballot box, they will vote very selfishly. That's what will happen. If you're somebody who's out there who kind of feels like, you know what, I don't really know who I'm going to vote for, I don't know what basis I'm going to vote on, I would say a suggestion might be to think about your local community and think about the country more generally and think to yourself, who out there, based on what I've talked about today, has, do you feel has the manifesto or the deep feeling that they might actually be better for the country or better for the community? Or think about, maybe other loved ones who you think, their lives could be improved overall by the vote that you cast. But overall, I kind of want to hear from you guys. I've spent all this time talking. Enough of me talking now. I want to hear from you below. Who do you think you are going to vote for and why? Jump in the comments and let me know. If you really enjoyed this video, I know it was really long, but believe me, there was so much to go over that you notice I haven't really waffled at all. I've literally just told you what needed to be said. So if you really enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. Share this video with other people you think might find it useful. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, in all things, be thankful and seek joy. Take care. Bye for now.